Welcome back. In today's video I'm going to show you how I turn this Power Wheels into an RC car. As you can see, I've always had a fascination with remote control stuff, and one thing that I've learned is when it comes to remote control cars, bigger is a lot more fun. So I've always wanted to turn a Power Wheels into a remote control car, and I wasn't planning to do that for a while. However, recently I came across one that was really cheap. I mean, $20 for a fully functional one was a price I really couldn't pass up. So this is the time that I was going to need to get to it. So let's get to it. So I marked the arm for the servo and I'm going to cut it down to an appropriate length. I'll leave a card here in case you didn't see me build this servo yet. Then I'm just going to pop a hole through here, and that's going to allow me to bolt it to a control arm. This is really a lot like smaller RCs, just on a really big scale. So after a quick test fit, I can take and make something to attach it in there with. And I'm going to use a 1/4 inch thick piece of plywood and a few blocks of wood to stand it off. So I just drilled holes accordingly and screwed it down in place. Basically the concept here is that I'm trying to give it attachment points, and then this piece of plywood will be easier to attach to the car. So instead of drilling through the plastic, I'm taking and heating something up, and that's going to keep it more sturdy and hopefully help keep it from cracking. I realized I needed a little further up, so I used some blocks to shim it out with. Now I need to get this pin out in order to give myself another attachment point. So I drilled the head off and then I just pounded it through with a screwdriver. And I can run this really long bolt through here. You'll see in a second, but basically the linkage is going to go to here, and then this controls both sides. This bolt turned out to be almost too big, but that works out perfectly for us because then it won't come out that easy. And it won't be sloppy. So now after putting a nut all the way down on here, and I'm going to tighten that up against the plastic. So for the control arm, I'm not sure exactly the distance I want it to be, and I want to kind of make it adjustable. So I'm going to take and do a series of drill holes, and then I'm going to connect these together, and that's going to allow me to slide it in and out, shortening and extending the distance between the servo and the control arm. So with a couple bolts in there, I can cut this access off. I really probably should have used lock nuts here. So now I need to do a little twisting to make sure it can get from point A to point B without interfering with anything. And then I can drill the one end out to attach to the servo. Now I move the servo over to the side so I can get a bolt through here. And then I'm going to drop a couple washers on there. And now that linkage that we just made with some more washers and a lock nut. That should keep it free to move, but yet it'll be able to pull it back and forth. Now I can center it back up. So I can go to the other side and cut this down to a more appropriate length. Now I can drill a hole to attach it to the control arm. And real quick I decided to put another nut on there and a washer. Now instead of using lock nuts, I decided to jam two nuts together because I figured it'd be a little bit more secure on the top. And I can give it a test. Our dog hates remote control cars, so I can only imagine what she's thinking of this thing. Now for the throttle, there's a magnet that goes across this little sensor in here. And I was having difficulty trying to figure out how I was going to make this so that way I could control it with the servo. And after some struggling and, you know, of course missing the camera's point of view, I ended up coming up with an idea where I was just going to attach the two together and keep it kind of as one piece. So right here I'm attaching a little clip. And then I'm putting a string going one direction on this, which is going to attach to the servo. And then in the other direction I'm going to have a rubber band so that way it'll kind of return it to the home position, basically throttling it down. This isn't the most elegant solution I've ever came up with, but I like it and it works, and it seems like it's going to work pretty well. If you watch my channel long enough, this is kind of the improvising that I like to do anyways. Sorry, I'll be the first one to admit that this isn't the most aesthetically pleasing thing, but it does in fact work. And the one reason why I had a little bit of trouble is because of the fact that there's a little bit of a sensor there, and I believe that's a magnet that rides on it. And it would be too difficult in order to have one of them sweeping past the other one perfectly after disassembling this. So it was like, why destroy a perfectly functional thing when I can just retrofit it? So for this, it's going to work. As you can tell, there's not going to be any brakes. I doubt we're going to need it for the speed of this right now, for this season. So yeah, quick test, and this thing's working spectacular. So the servo basically twists that, and that's going to act like the throttle on like one of your electric bikes, which is the speed controller I'm using for this. I did not take it off my son's bike. This is a different one. So now I mounted that to a piece of plastic, and that way I can mount that inside of the car and I can pull it off if I need to. As you can see, I already got the other electronics already mounted in there for that speed controller. Those were gone over in the last video. But now I got to run the speed control signal to the back of the car, and there's a lot of extra wires that I don't need here. Well, I need them. I'm going to keep them for a different project, a different day. But for this, they can be removed. So now those 3 wires I can run back that come from that control grip, and I can cover things up as we go. This did turn up a little bit short, so I used an old phone charging cable, and I just didn't use the 4th wire. And I just took and soldered all the connections to the speed controller as if it was in a e-bike. Now I did take and power both the motors in parallel, so effectively they are going to be getting 48 volts at open throttle. And these motors are only made for 12 volts, so they are not going to last long, and I'm not planning for them to last long because I have a lot of other plans for this RC car. One thing that I did miss filming is below the speed controller I mounted a piece of that 1/4 inch Luan plywood, so that way I could mount the speed controller as well as the battery pack to it. Now we can throw a battery pack in it, and time for a test run. Hey you guys, I put a whole lot of work into my videos, so if you like what you see, please hit that subscribe button below. I'd say the smoke says yes. Well guys, as expected, that was a lot of fun, and I'm not done with it yet because it's by far a lot slower than what it needs to be. Hey, would you like to see me do this with a real Mustang? Maybe a Camaro, maybe a Corvette? Hit that subscribe button. I'll get there one day.